we'll be in work on Monday. It's all a big sort of storm in a teacup. And then by 9 a.m. Monday morning, we'd already done a full sort of comms plan of how we were going to tell the team that they weren't going to be working in the office as of Friday at 5 p.m. We'd done announcements to clients and all the rest of it. So I think it changed. The pace of change was pretty ludicrous.
Yeah.
But for us, I think it started. The first thing we started thinking about was sort of safety of our team and clients, because we get a huge amount of visitors to the office. So we were sort of looking at it and going, well, it was that decision of going, we're not formally being told yet that we need to sort of distance or do certain things. So I think 16th was a week before the full formal lockdown announcement, or that week of.
Yeah.
So we were a few days before that, and we sort of thought initially, maybe is that a bit aggressive? But then we sort of think, you have to come around to the sort of well-being point of it and go, well, actually, is there any, what's the point of adding, when we can go remote and when we can do everything over webinar, and we've been using this technology for a while, so we're sort of quite familiar with it. Why do we need to put people's health at risk, basically? So that was the first thing. And then sort of, I guess from there, it started to cascade out. So what will clients need from us? So at that point, we hadn't really seen a huge amount of noise coming from our client base. That started maybe towards the end of that week. And then the following week, much more noise. And then the final bit, then probably more was starting to think about how are we gonna have to adapt. So even though we're pretty familiar with the technology, it doesn't mean that it was just sort of it was business as usual in terms of being able to deliver our core services. Yeah. But we do a huge amount of stakeholder work and discovery meetings, and we have projects that quite important to us, making sure that we've got sort of robust level of income over the next couple of months. It needed to start, but they were sort of hinging on group workshops and sort of event, typically sort of people-based event kick-off meetings that we would do. So we had to quite quickly figure out how we're going to adapt that, how we're going to adapt being able to be in a room with a whiteboard and post-it notes and sort of the things you'd have to do interacting with people, and how can we make sure that we can get the same value for the client and sort of carry on that service. So we've done manage to do it. I mean, thankfully, I am. That was lumbered onto some other people who have to run those sessions, but they've done a great job of it. And we've had those things have been running probably for about 2 or 3 weeks now.
Good. So how has it affected business?
So I mean, in terms of we saw quite a sort of big shock factor in the first couple of weeks, like I said. So March and April for us were relatively normal. I mean, in terms of we had enough project work we're a type of business where we don't sort of work hand to mouth. We often have, we typically have a large number of projects, and probably a varying percentage of a bit of backlog of work, just because you've got new project work, you've got ongoing support and improvement work, as well as retainers. So there's that sort of whole mix. So I think we thankfully had enough. We'd done enough. Annoyingly, sort of February and March up until the 16th. March would have probably been our record month ever, or our best month ever, if we'd carried on for the second half of that month. We'd done target, I think, by about the 6th of March or something. So we were sort of it was looking pretty healthy, and we'd had a good few months building up to that. But thankfully, those months of then all the work that we've been winning and things that we've been securing have kept the team busy over March and most through to now April. I think new business was the biggest sort of that got hit the most. So our number of inquiries on a day-to-day basis dropped by about 95% for the first 4 weeks. So we still had sort of dialogue. I think we were lucky again that we had some conversations that already progressed to a point where they were sort of invested. So they didn't all just disappear. We had a couple that were put on hold, a couple of things that were put on hold. And we had quite a big, our biggest hit department, I guess, is that we have a marketing team that runs sort of campaign strategy and ongoing activity for people on a monthly retainer type basis. So we had quite a lot of people, some in sort of travel, tourism type markets where they were hit quite quickly. So those sorts of retainers were paused and frozen, and a few projects were paused of that sort of nature. So that was hit quite hard. But what we found subsequently is that and we said this, we were sort of, I mean, it was a brave prediction for me, but I said all along that you know, as the weeks would go by, people would, one, become a little bit more comfortable with the current situation, but two, would start to, you know, they would start to realise that we can't all just literally do nothing, because if we all literally did nothing, then, you know, like, we'll sort of speed up the economic crisis that we're going through rather than sort of stave it off.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, we found now that a few of those things that were paused have now have already come back into the pipeline and reignited. A couple of projects that they were sort of maybe just about to start, that sort of thing, and they said, oh well, we're going to wait and to see what happens. And then now 2 or 3 weeks on from that, they've started to say, okay, right, we're ready now. We're now sort of starting to plan for to be doing some sort of business to normal levels again in June or July or September or August. August or September. It's just varying for each client.
Nicola's asked,
yeah,
Nicola was asked then what you were talking about, you moving everything from home and still running these sessions. So what systems are you using for the interactive whiteboard sessions?
I'm not sure. I don't know is the honest answer. I'm not sure whether they're even actually. I don't think that the process is completely mirroring that. I think they've just had to change the format. But I'll find out, Nicola, and I can share that afterwards on the comments, or get Craig to send that around. I think primarily, I mean, so some of them just haven't been able. There's a couple of things where we just haven't been able to mirror it, because you'd have some of the work we were doing was stakeholder research work where we were going out to their customers, and they've just said, well, we can't be. The point of it was, in certain circumstances, was to have that group discussion mentality. So, you know, we've been able to run some of them, but where they were sort of truly interactive or having to specifically use certain bits of kit and stuff, we've had to maybe make different plans for those. But yeah, I don't think we're doing anything over a webinar that is specifically a whiteboard, if that makes sense.
Okay, well, isn't it? I haven't learned how to draw on it very well yet. Well, on the when you're in the call anyway. So what have you done? What have Spindogs done differently marketing wise? How have you shifted things?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this is an interesting question. I mean, I think if you asked our marketing manager, Emily, she's probably aged by about 10 years, I'd say, in the last 4 weeks. Just because, not because of necessarily there's been huge demands from us for her to do more or less stuff, but just the frequency and pace of change and how we've had to react to things has just been nuts. So I think, but I think there's an interesting point around this when as we start to get into the sort of marketing side, marketing topic, is that I've been sitting on loads of other webinars and contributed to a few as well. And I think the thing that's interesting is that from a marketing perspective, this is sort of hitting everyone. You know, we're not talking to two clients or two types of businesses where it's hit them in the same way, or they're reacting in exactly the same way. It's completely different for everyone based on a whole multitude of reasons and layers, whether of how it's affected the business, whether that's sales stopping, or maybe a big client's had to stop paying them, or there's all these different reasons. But I think for us historically, and hopefully I recognise a few of the names on the list of the attendees, so some of them hopefully would recognise this when I explain it, is that we've never really adopted when I say a standard marketing approach. I mean that sort of like straight spray and pray, sort of just making noise and just pushing people towards standard web page type marketing approach. We've always been quite heavily focused on sort of offering value first, sort of that foot in the door mentality. Depending on what book you've read, or there's like a thing by Gary Vaynerchuk called Jab Jab Hook, where it's sort of you're putting out sort of bits of content and offering small bits of consultancy to show value and build rapport with people before you get them as clients. So we've been doing that for many years, really, in different formats. So actually, the shift to where I think people need to be now, and where I'm seeing the good examples of people being now, didn't take a huge amount for us. We've just wrapped it up. So that's what I mean by. And so we've been doing way more. We've got we do like a free audit normally. There's some sort of either web audit or SEO audit on our site most of the time. That was turned off temporarily for some reason, because we were running some other sort of campaign. So we turned that back on. We've switched, or we have a training academy. So we do we release dates quite regularly for sort of SEO, social, PPC, all the sort of specific tactical digital marketing sessions for a couple of hours. The sessions normally they're a few £100. We've released those for free to everyone for during the lockdown period. And then we've had our own events program in terms of obviously digital events, but like webinars and training stuff that we've been running on top of that as well. So the sort of the essence of what we were doing in terms of the message and that sort of offering that value first approach didn't change. I guess just the frequency and the specific focus and how we're getting it out to people has changed slightly. Yeah, and it's, I mean, so for us, I mean, I think we signed last week. We signed our first client that was a completely new cold lead through the approach since we locked down, and they came off the back of an audit. So that was a good example of how, I mean, we were doing that anyway, I've said before, but it shows how that stuff works. But I think the sort of reason why I've gone into the broader picture there is that I think I probably have that conversation with clients, every new client we meet, and certainly existing clients when they'll say, oh, look, what can we be doing to get more? I mean, I remember I was talking to Claire the other night, and I was saying, I remember talking to you about saying you should do videos and webinars years ago, saying that you should be doing that type of stuff, and obviously doing a really good job of that now. But I think it's this type of that sort of white paper content, guides, toolkits, audits, all the things that take a little bit of time and effort, and that's not necessarily all just from a marketing person, that could be from some other expertise within the business.
Yeah. They're
typically the things that get met with the most resistance when you're talking to people about sort of strategic tactics. So often the easiest option is to switch back to, we'll just do like a small paid campaign, just chuck people to a standard service page on our website and hope that they sign up and hope they're interested. So I actually think that, you know, now these tactics where people should be moving to aren't new. It's just now that they're more important than ever, because sort of the old way of just hoping, you know, like I called it earlier, spray and pray, and hoping people just find you and you make enough noise, you'll get enough opportunities. It's not relevant in the current situation.
What do you see, so that people can get some value and some ideas from this? So what are you seeing others do that's working quite well in the last 6 weeks? Where they've pivoted, changed their marketing approach, or done something innovative?
I think, I mean, it's really difficult, because you mentioned this as a potential question before we sat down, and we've been specific. We had a call. We ran a webinar. We have like a thing called Marketing Club, which is internally, which is like we offer it to clients of a certain size with certain setups within their marketing team, where we just do like we have a speaker, or one of us will speak on a topic, and we'll have like an hour together, and it's primarily therapy for marketeers. So, but we did one. We had one scheduled just for the week after we all locked down, and we ran it anyway, and just did a sort of like, how is everyone getting on? How is it affecting everyone? And we said then, like, you know, everyone, we went away from there as a group, about 8 of us who joined the call, and we all said, look, can we all go away and keep an eye on good examples and bad examples, and bring them to the tables for when next time we sit down in a month, 6 weeks time. And I think outside of the things that I've said, I mean, like in terms of, I think I haven't got any specifics of like this company is doing a good job of with a specific campaign, but I think there's a lot of, the main thing I'm seeing the shift in is a lot of people sort of switching to we're here to support, we're here to help, that sort of empathetic angle. From my observation, so there's a lot of, you will all have seen those examples, I'm sure. I think, but I think it's the key that seems to be missing is people aren't showing, being specific, or showing people how. So they're not saying, here's this piece of content of how you can do something, or here's this work, you know, here's this specific toolkit that you can use that we've developed, and it's really useful for this time. There are examples of that, but they're way less frequent. But he's on the call actually, but one person who, assuming it's the same, so I can't see you, I assume it's the same Steve Lobley. But Steve is someone that we've worked with in the past, who has helped us with some sort of leadership management training and some sort of some stuff that we were going through last year in terms of like a strategic change and direction for growth last year. And he's a good example of, rather than sort of just, he's been posting stuff and doing sort of articles and tips and stuff on social, but in my inbox, I got it, I think yesterday or the day before, which was, it's like just a constant commentary of things to be thinking about, and things he, collated that he's seen around effects that he's either seeing on existing clients, or ways that that he knows other business owners or people are being impacted by this. And that some of that is strategic about how you're managing your team and leading a team. And some of it is personally, how you're dealing with homeschooling your kids, as a business owner or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's a really nice example, I thought.
Yeah. Anything else you're seeing that people can borrow from that's really working well, or?
I think there's a lot of, I've seen a few examples of people. There's a few people doing quite clever stuff around sort of just changing and pivoting what they're doing. So, I mean, in terms of the messaging, I don't think there's much you can do right now other than just be really authentic and honest about your approach to stuff. You've got to be empathetic to the situation. It doesn't mean you can't sell. It doesn't mean you can't promote that what you're doing adds value and will help customers. But like I said, it's just got to be a bit more thought through than it was maybe like 6 months ago. But we've seen people like, some venues, lots of venues we're working with switching to the whole online delivery model. And that seems to be working quite well. And they're all doing sort of tips and video sort of content where they're doing Insta videos on how to, certain recipes, or how to make cocktails and that type of thing. So there's this sort of that switch to that engagement piece where there's not maybe for some, if they're doing the online delivery service where they can actually still generate some revenue, great. But others where they can't, they are completely locked down still. They're sort of trying to keep that engagement piece with their customer base over this period. So when it does release, and we can get back into normal life, that they've got that they've maintained that level of dialogue.
Yeah, some credit in the bank. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that was one of the things I wrote down earlier, was like that pay it forward type approach. That's 100%. You can't. Obviously, I'm big into the whole measurement of marketing activity, but right now it's like there's going to be things that you're doing and laying down right now that are purely for 3-4 months time when people start to come back around to things. So
if someone had a marketing budget now, where would you advise they spend it?
It's a horrible question. Thank you, Craig. Because primarily because it's just totally different for everyone. And I think sort of me doing my empathy bit that I've just talked about, like for some clients, they don't have a budget right now. So it's just been frozen completely. I think the majority of people that we've had budget with that have kept it, who had budget spend with us that have kept it, they've switched a lot of it away from sort of like a generic any paid models around sort of pay-per-click or social advertising, and they've focused it all into content. So that's all that value add content piece. So I think making sure that I think that some of it splitting away from more outward facing campaign stuff and focusing more internally on clients. So I think that's one of the things that I think is a sort of like a slightly missing trick with all this, is that your existing clients are, if you're not already spending a large portion of your marketing efforts and budget on them, this is definitely the time that you should be. So I think thinking about how. I mean, examples we've given recently, we've talked with someone at Cardiff University where they help promote the alumni, what's the word? What is it? Network, I guess. So people who donate to the university for various facilities and events and that type of thing. So their normal sort of approach would be, we host a nice event. It might be a gala dinner, it might be a wine tasting, and we get all these alumni people who've helped us over the years and donated through either a membership type fee or a one-off fee, and we entertain them and we make them feel nice and say thank you for the stuff we've done. But one of the things we've been talking to about them is, and they're now starting to roll out, is actually going, well, they can't do that now for obvious reasons. So they initially started looking at it from an approach of going, well, actually, how can we, do we wait until the lockdown is slightly lifted, and then we do people doing walking tours around the building, but like 7 meters apart or whatever. And it didn't really work. So rather than waiting for that, we said, well, they've changed the tactic now to be more focused around, well, how can we, peeling it back to the underlying core principle, which is we're trying to say thank you to the people who've donated. So we talked about they're using, I don't know if anyone have heard of this, but there's a tool called Loom, which is like it's not a webinar tool, but it's like, it allows you to screen capture what you're doing, and it videos your face down in the corner. So if you're doing like a walking tour of a demo of a product, or you're talking through a slideshow, it's quite a nice way of doing that, because you can see the face in the corner talking, and it just sort of humanizes the process a little bit. So they're now using existing students who are using these facilities that alumni have donated towards, and incentivizing them. So rather than using ad spend and sort of spending money on events and all the things that would go with that, they're using that to sort of line the pockets of some well-spoken students, I guess, who benefit from these facilities, who are then using slideshows of photography and sort of standard stock stuff that they had on file, talking through the facility, talking through what the research that they're doing as part of their PhD, and then talking about how grateful they are to that specific person about for the donation they made, because it's helping them with their studies. So that's a really nice example. And then the other one was is an office fit out provider that we were talking to, who they're not actually a client yet, but we just sort of, they were part of another call that we were recently, and they were saying they're panicking about what happens, in the whole new normal thing, which everyone keeps talking about at the moment. And they were panicking about, well, what do we do? And, we don't know really what that's going to look like, and all those sorts of things. So sort of had a bit of dialogue with them in the background, and said, well, look, there's a huge opportunity for you to own that, dialogue, and actually sort of think about how you're going to create content around that, and be almost like a first mover. Because right now there's a huge number of people that are still sort of just in a holding pattern. So I think, there's an old like marketing adage that the first person to say they're the best at something is. So it's sort of like using that principle right now, where a lot of their competitors are still sort of either in panic mode or lockdown mode, or just not quite worked out how they're going to approach.
You're still seeing that. You are still seeing. I thought by now everyone's sort of, okay, I can take my product on. I said on the call yesterday, I thought what BFit did with the way they quickly went from no online website to suddenly having this website where all the classes and all the extras were on this fantastic website. I thought like everyone by now would have made those jumps, but you're still not seeing that.
Not in all sectors, no. I mean, we've seen it quite different. Like it just, like I said, it literally impacts every sector differently, and every business within that sector slightly differently. So a lot of our clients who are already trading, or their main business model was e-commerce, they all clamped down quite quickly. But they've all found that all the stats are showing that their visits are up. Their sales are doing pretty well. So they've all started to come back out of the woodwork. I think we've got others who, I don't think they've been necessarily impacted in terms of ongoing workload, but they're just being super cautious. Yeah. For us, we don't think the main hit really hits us as a business until it won't start to hit us until June properly. Properly. So we've had to make adjustments now due to a reduction in new business and some of the things that we've had going on. But our main focus is about going, well, we need to do everything we can to maintain what we're doing right now, but and collect as much cash as we can to protect us for maybe June, July, August. And then we're seeing a lot of people still in that mode. So anyway, we just said to them, you need to own that. So they're quite a big provider. Most of the people on the school would have known. No, I won't mention it because it's I'm not actually technically doing anything for them yet, so they may not be appreciative of this. But if you search on LinkedIn, you may well come across them. They're a local office fit out company, but they do stuff nationally. They've got loads of clients, so they've now put a survey out to all their clients about how they're already thinking. So they're trying to talk to their customers about how they're going to adapt in the future, and then they're going to collate all that into almost like a sort of like the future of office space study that we did for and turn that into like a white paper and a download and something they're going to be able to share through social. And then there's all sorts of micro bites that they can throw out of that around how people have specifics about home working, video content they could create around it and sort of explainers. So yeah, I'm not sure if that was actually a question. I've just gone off on one.
I think people are getting value. You talk a lot of different things, and hopefully everyone is listening. You can.
One quick final example. Sorry, mate. One quick final example. There's there's a great article that if you search, which I read like right quite early in the lockdown process, which sort of certainly helped my mindset a little bit. It was I subscribe to Harvard Business Review, but they've opened up all their COVID-19 related content. It's free now anyway. So if you search for, I think the search is something like how Chinese businesses were affected by lockdown or something like that. There's a great article. It comes up pretty much top of search whenever I've looked for it. And it's an article, it gives like 20 examples of how different businesses in China adapted or changed through the lockdown and the things they did. And a great example that I think can apply to if you're in a sort of B2C space, or you're like, if you're like in retail and you had a shop, it's the Chinese version. I'm not sure they're as big as Body Shop, but it was a Chinese equivalent to, say, the Body Shop, where they were obviously locked down, and they have, instead of just furloughing all their staff, they trained over like a week. They trained all their normal sales staff within the shops in how to use all. It's not Instagram over there. They've got, I can't remember the name of the channel they were using, but it's their equivalent to an Instagram and WhatsApp in China. And they trained them all on how to use that and effectively become like influencers, and gave them all sort of deal discount codes they could give to their networks. And I think they increased their sales in the first month of lockdown. They increased their sales by 200% year on year. Wow. So it's sort of, I just thought that was quite, it's just when they didn't necessarily go out to spend huge amounts of budget on new marketing campaigns. They just focused on using the people that they had to go, well, we can touch base with people in a slightly different way. And one of our clients is the Depot, and they've obviously they just launched a new Depot venue, and we were working on a couple of other projects that were in the pipeline for them for new venues. And then a few weeks later, this hit. So they've pivoted straight into, they're doing like an online drinks delivery service, I think, within a certain radius of the venue now. And I think that's going okay for them. But one of the things that we took from that was talk them through what they'd done, and they've got a load of their team now using WhatsApp and doing the sort of like weekly deals, weekly updates, and it's driving, seeing really good results in terms of sales returns.
Yeah, I think that piece about I talked about it briefly yesterday, so I'll share because there's quite a few people who went on this call yesterday. But the thing I took from a webinar I listened to 2 weeks ago was, even if it hasn't affected us in the same way, but now you said it earlier, now is the time to get closer to your existing clients. It does then make you question why you weren't closer maybe 12 months ago. But yeah, if you can offer, your business is struggling, there's no reason why you can't still offer your network someone else's business, someone else's product, value add to your client. Because as you said earlier, paying it forward and value add later down the line can only be, I think if you haven't reached out to your client yet, someone you haven't dealt with for 2 years, I'd still reach out to them and offer them something else, whether it's offering them your free audit or a free financial review or Ev's free 7-day thing, offering, and Nicola's offering free coffees if you just want to chat about business. I think offering other value adds, even if it's not your specialism, is certainly worth hence the reason for this.
Yeah, I mean, what we found as well, I mean, I forgot to mention this, but like a lot of our guys, so Claire is our client service director, and then other members of her team that wouldn't typically be advised, they would have client relationships, but they wouldn't necessarily be advising on specifics around social media. We've just sort of put a whole bunch of people who wouldn't normally be on alert for what people are other clients are doing on social. We're probably having 5 to 6 calls a day or emails a day with people now, where we're going, we've seen you're doing this. If you did it very slightly differently, that would actually maybe help the result. So there's no benefit to us. It's not a paid campaign that we're working on, or some of them aren't even maybe necessarily active clients anymore. They're just in our network. But we were just talking about it earlier, where she's, we saw someone who they're a medical supplier. They're helping to support with some of the PPE equipment stuff, and they posted on it, but it was just nowhere to be seen on their website. They did one of the directors has done one single post about it. So Claire's spoke to them now and given them a lot of advice on how to make sure there's articles on the site, try and get it seeded out across a couple of other platforms and channels.
We've had a question coming from Andrew. He's asked, can we get a little flavour of account-based marketing? That would be great. What does this typically look like for organisations? How account-based sales might integrate interface with this?
Who's that, Andrew Beer?
Yeah, I got no idea what that question means, but I'm assuming you do.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, well, so I think it's a really good question. I mean, it isn't a loaded question because I know Andrew, but it's a bloody good question. Thank you, Andrew. So account-based marketing, it's not particularly new, but it's, I guess, again, it's something we've been talking to clients about for many years, but it's one of those things that because of I don't know what it is. I guess it's the perceived effort and the potential risk of it that people sometimes, or like it's sort of slightly outside of the norm, so people don't feel quite comfortable with it. But we've been using it with a few clients for the last year more actively, and we're seeing really good results with it. So account-based marketing is where you specifically, it's all linked to personalization. So it's where you specifically target a company or a company and the people within that company with a campaign. So they still are an active client, I think, but the people that we work with specifically on this aren't there anymore. So I don't think it's anything sensitive in what I'm going to say. So I'll just give you the example. But they're like the global leader in cash counting and intelligent cash draws for retail. So they do, they're based in Newport. I think the company's called Telemate. So they do the things where you stick a load of like the drug dealer things in Bad Boys 2, that sort of thing, where it counts all the money. They do those, but they also do this system where it actually counts the money when you put them into the drawer, and then it sort of syncs that up to the cloud, and it's sort of like live cash counting, and that's quite, and they're the global market leader in it. And they obviously their clients are major retailers, so your Starbucks, anyone that takes cash in a till, basically. So we ran an ABM campaign with them, and we primarily, this is sort of a joint effort really with some of their marketing guys, because they're the first people that we managed to sort of convince to have a go at it. But we facilitated all of the online piece of it, and they did what I'm going to explain now. So they picked 3 or 4 different brands. I think the first 2 they went for, I can't remember one of them. They're like a sort of, I think they're like a sweet shop type chain, and maybe I think the other one was Jack Wills. So they specifically they did a load of digging around LinkedIn around who the right people were within those organisations in terms of the team of people that would procure this type of service, and then the specific people within that. And then we created a dedicated page on the website, which was off the menu. So no, you couldn't find this by Googling it or anything. You'd have to have the link. And the page was, very specifically talked to. They did a couple of variations of it. So some of it was just Hi Jack Wills, for example, and as in the brand. Then others was Hi Craig, and talking to the specific person. And then they seeded that and used LinkedIn emails to drive that to people. And then they followed that up with like printed campaigns where they really went to town on it. So some people I've seen have just done sort of tailored brochures or sort of like personalized brochures, which are quite cheap and easy to do now. You're not talking about huge volumes. But they actually did that. They did a personalized brochure, but they did I don't know if anyone's seen these, but they're like printed booklets, but inside the booklet is like a sort of 5-inch LCD screen. So you open the book and it actually starts presenting a video to you from a brochure. So they really went to town on it. I think those units cost about, I think they were about 120 quid a head to print the brochures. Obviously the video content had to be created, but they had that capability in house, and the copy was all done by them. I think they had 100% success rate for their first campaign that they did with it. So I mean, that's just a broad concept, and that's a live example. But will you read the question for me? Was it that's the explainer? You were asking me, was that? Here we go. Yeah, here we go. That's the flavour. And that's what it looks like. So that's quite an extravagant example where they have quite a high return on investment. Their customer spend is quite high in return. So they worked out, well, what's our cost? What can we what's our cost for conversion, and what can we spend on the activity that builds up to it? You can do that in a way. You can do that in a much lower key level than that. But it's about knowing the audience and knowing your customer, knowing what you can do for them and the value you can add for them, and then tailoring and creating all the content that sits within the campaign, sitting with that. So we've been trialing it recently. We haven't actually, I don't think we were about to launch it before we locked down. So we've just set one up we do quite a lot for housing associations, for example. So I think we were going to, our marketing team had just planned one for them. where it was tailored web page, talking to the specific team or people that we could find within the organisation, followed up with a, because even if you send that link to someone, it doesn't necessarily mean they're immediately going to open it and immediately ring you up. It doesn't work like that. You've got to understand that people's sort of intent of when they were ready to have that conversation is just different now. And the old sort of historic funnel process, people still move through those stages, but they don't move through it in a straight line anymore, do they? If we all think about how we buy anything of value now, you don't go, I need it, I'm thinking about it, I'm buying it, and then it doesn't happen all in that straight line that quickly. You often will circle around, and there's a whole concept, but I think McKinsey did this, which is to do with rather than it being a marketing funnel or a sales funnel, it's a sales pretzel. So you have a few different touch points, and you sort of squiggle around there until you're ready to buy.
Yeah.
So I think you follow it up with typically it's followed up with printed material. It may take a couple of bits of email marketing. But typically, minimally, especially now, I mean, we've actually, one, you're being specific to people, it's totally personalized, it's going to get people talking the other end. And so the people we've seen work and we've done work on it with, it's worked quite well for them in terms of minimally getting engagement back. Doesn't necessarily mean it's always the right time. I think the Telemate guys got quite lucky that they'd struck, well, the arm was hot with a couple of the clients, so they onboarded straight away with it. But the linking to this whole thing right now, I mean, we've actually seen a couple of clients switch back to very, very focused and tailored internal client direct mail. So whereas we wouldn't really do if we did direct mail at the moment, it would be very creative campaign led. If we were doing anything like that for existing clients, quite rare we do it, but we're actually having a couple of conversations about that now, where people are saying, well, everyone's at home, so why can't I send them something physical? It might not be as simple as just a letter. It would probably be something a bit more thought through than that. But
that's interesting. As you've been saying, I've been thinking about someone in my profession who's gone on a big recruitment drive up in Oxford area, well, just past Oxford. He's been doing something like that where he's sending, he mentioned iPod, like an iPod, but he's picking the target of people he'd like to have working for his business, and he's sending them a recorded message, a voice message on something they can then keep. It does play the message first of all, come and have a chat and a coffee. We'd like, so I think I hadn't heard it referred to as Andrew referred to it as audience-based marketing. But
sorry, you've sparked me off on one now, Andrew. So I'm going to keep talking about some other stuff. Sorry, Craig, you have to just listen to this now. But yeah, I mean, one of the other just thinking of that personalisation thing. I mean, it's the sort of thing as well where you go back to the budget question. It's really hard to answer that for everyone. It's just so unique to each person that'll be on this call and anyone else that might be thinking about it. But I think the key thing I would say is that it's not all right now. It's not all necessarily about what you're spending. It's about the time you're investing. So a lot of that can be in content or personalization type approach that we just talked about. But one of the things, it's not really like a generic marketing tactic, but linked to what Andrew's asked about there, is when we're a solutions-based sell typically. So people come to us with a problem or some sort of objective. We consult with them. We maybe add some value, and then we'll finalize what that looks like in terms of a series of activity or a project, and then we go from there. But one of the things that always was bugging me about a year ago was that we would put all this work and effort often into these documents, and sometimes depending on the format of the way people are buying, this will again be different to everyone on this call, is that the format and the way that people buy from you, sometimes it's a written formal RFP. Sometimes it's someone rings you up and says, can we have a chat? Sometimes it's someone sends an email and says, can you quote? It's not always a consistent way, and people aren't always as open to speaking to you and listening to what you have to say or understanding maybe some of the variants in a proposal. So when you've got, with lots of people, when you're selling a service, there's, you might say this is £5,000 worth of services, but it's not as simple as that. If the client wants to do it for £4,000, there's often a way of you making that happen. There's all sorts of things that when you get a no and they've not really explored or had a conversation with you, it gets quite frustrating. So what linked to that personalization piece, the Loom video app that I mentioned earlier, if you haven't seen that, definitely check it out. It's it's free, it's a free account, and you can, unless you want to brand it all up, and I think then it's like $11 a month, and you can use it as a sort of install piece of software on your machine, or you can just use it as a Chrome browser, so you can just quickly click on it in Chrome and you can record what you're doing. So what we started doing in the last year is every time we're doing a proposal to a new client that we've not worked with before, or it's a sort of formal tender process, we record a 10-minute. The person who's written the proposal and done the sort of like thinking piece behind it, they do a 5 to 10 minute Loom video over the top of it. So when we send that to the client, they get a quick. I think maybe some of the people on this call might have had that from me, maybe Emma, where we literally we obviously say thank you. It's specific. It's me, Liam, saying, "Hi, Craig. Thank you for the opportunity as a first starting point." And then you'll talk through and just sort of go, look, here's a couple of the points that these are the things that pains that we think we're solving for you, or these are the objectives we think you're trying to meet. This is what we think is a good solution. But if budget's not quite there, then talk to us and we could probably work it out. Or like sometimes we'll include optional ideas, or sometimes we'll include things that we know other companies that compete with us can't do or don't do. So we'll try and make, rather than leaving the document to do all that work, we'll talk through that very, very quickly, or as quickly as we can. I tend to take a lot longer than the others because I just ramble on a bit. But we found this our percentage success rate of the people who get those is shot up. I think we were running to either an 80 or 90% success rate of those since we started doing those.
Yeah, that's good.
So yeah, definitely worth.
Well, I
just put it in the comments.
I was at the conference in the States 2 years ago, and there was a guy speaking. He'd come all the way to America. He was actually from Bolton or something like that. He was sitting up that way. One of the best tips I got from him, and I started doing it in stock, was after a discovery meeting with a new prospect, started sitting and recording a quick 1.5 minute WhatsApp video saying exactly the same. This is what we discussed. This is where I believe we can add value. Yeah. And my take-up rate on those was massive. And I stopped. One of those things, as you're saying it, I'm going, why did I stop? I know it's why did I stop?
But you've accidentally picked up on the entire mentality of, I think, where marketeers or business owners, if you're driving marketing yourself or driving a marketing team, you've hit the nail on the exact head there, Craig. Which is, it's one of those things. The amount of things that you do like that, and we're just as guilty. We do it all the time, where you have something that's working, something that worked well, and for some reason or another you stop or you break the habit, and then you go, oh shit, why did I stop doing that? And I think it's those types of activities that, often when you're busy, or even like right down to the specific types of marketing tactic, if you're talking about like, if you talk to a marketeer and say, can I just chuck some paid campaign? Can I just chuck some paid, pay-per-click ads to a service page on my website, and it might get me some results, versus you're going to do like a 6-month content strategy and write a load of downloads and white papers, and you're going to the things that take that little bit of effort or time will sometimes you're easily distracted away from with being busy with other stuff. They're the classic things where they're all the things that I think right now, they've been there all along, but now everyone needs to start thinking about pivoting into those. And some of them, like I said, they don't necessarily need budget. You might need a bit of help on design, or you might need a bit. I mean, some people, we're writing those things for some people, but others are producing themselves. We're just designing them. Some people just do that in-house. I don't think right now production value should be the main focus for people. It's about getting yourself out there. So like, same way, if you're going to record videos through this sort of channel, or use like a Loom thing, it's going to be you, and you're sat where you are, wherever you're in a room. You can't really control that right now. So I don't think worrying about high production value for sort of general commentary and advice and tips and stuff. So just get it out there.
Let's maybe bring it all together, mate. I got one final question for you, then I'll close this down. I think because we've been 45 minutes already, flown by. Sorry. So if we were summarising everything we've talked about, what 3 things should people be thinking about right now when it comes to marketing?
It's unique to everyone. I'm just going to caveat that with everything else I've said about marketing. I know, because I've sat on a few of these where people have tried to give generic advice, and you can just see people curling into a ball where they're like, this doesn't apply to me. So if some of these things don't apply to you, I'm sorry. But I think the first thing I would be doing is I'd be doing as much as you can to talk to your customers, and asking them what they need. That applies to everyone.
Talk to existing customers. Can talk to existing contacts.
Yeah. That's a generic one. I think then it's about your value add. So that's and how are you adding value over and above what you were doing before all this hit. And so is that with content? Is it with training? Is it with webinars? Those types of things. That's where I'd be focusing my time on now. We've developed, I mean, this isn't a plug, but we're working on something, and Andrew will know this because he's goaded me into it. But we're working on like internally at the moment. We've developed like a toolkit, I guess. It's not quite at that point yet, but where we've it's a workflow, like a PowerPoint workflow, where you start with all the different options of like audits, white papers, downloads, all those types of things. It gives you 6 metrics to validate what you're doing against. So I think that's like, is it accessible? Is it credible? Is it does it add value? Those sorts of things. So it gives you like a set of things to work through to validate what you're doing, and then it gives you a worksheet to map all that out for each individual piece of content you're going to do. So if anyone wants that, it's not going to be ready for about a week, but if anyone wants that, then chuck it in the comments and we can send that out when it's ready. Was I supposed to do 3?
Well, yeah, I think you've given more than enough during the course. I don't know if you've got a third one, but just give us your email address while you're talking. So it's Liam at...
Giles at Spindogs. I'll type it in for you now. If anyone wants to send an email.
People can take that and drop you an email. Thing you just mentioned.
Oh yeah, no, you got it wrong, but thanks, mate. It's the second one. Yeah, I mean, it's hard with the 3 specific things. It's so bloody difficult at the moment. But hopefully, the last 3 or 4 questions we've covered on marketing, they give a sort of general sense of the approach and where you should be. I don't think, if I was going to give specific tips, it would be don't try and do everything. Just pick 2 or 3 things. Pick 2 or 3 channels. I mean, like with specific, I got asked a specific question about social media the other day, and it was like, do my biggest bit of feedback to every single customer or client I sit down with is you're trying to do far too many things across far too many channels, and you don't really have a purpose for each one. So like, for example, that applies to whatever activity you're doing right now. So like pick one or a few things and do them really well and sort of get behind them.
Amanda's asked the question, but I don't quite understand what she means by the question, so I've just put it on the direct message. So she's put, any thoughts RE charities? I don't know if you know, Amanda, if she works for a charity, or does she mean work for charities?
What's the question? Where is it?
Well, she just put, if you look at the question, but she's literally just put any thoughts RE charities. So I don't know whether she works for a charity and she means what marketing they should be doing together.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, we do quite a bit of work. Fair enough. We do quite a work for charities, and I've got a few close family members who work for 10 of us and a few people like that.
She's followed up. She works for City Hospice. Any thoughts RE marketing?
That's such a broad question. I'm happy if you want to jump on and like do a half an hour together, Amanda. I'm happy to do that and actually just listen to what you're doing now. And it's so, like I said, it's so specific.
I agree.
I've seen a lot of charities putting content out there, and they're struggling. Their normal way that they're getting their income, which is sort of heavily event based or heavily other people running their own sort of fundraising events, is quite difficult. But we've definitely got a couple of clients who are doing some interesting stuff there. So if you wanted to,
she said thank you. So
do that separately.
So yeah, Amanda, if you drop Liam an email, anyone else wants to drop Liam an email, I'll just type my email in there. I promised everyone who joined today a free copy of one of the best books I've ever read. So please do email me your email address, and I'll send you the PDF of Double Double, which for me was one of the best books I ever read about a year or so ago, and I plan to reread it now. But Liam, thanks for joining us, much appreciated. This has been recorded, so I will share the recording and we'll put it out as a podcast when we get to it in the next couple of weeks. Feel free to email me any questions. If you fancy being a guest and doing this next week with me, do give me a shout. I'm happy to do that. Liam, any final closing thoughts?
No, yeah, sorry if I've waffled on. It's hopefully you've got some value. Yeah, you got some value from that. And thank you for listening. And obviously, the obligatory stay safe, I guess.
I'll just come back to Nicola's question she asked right at the beginning. So what should leaders and SME business owners be doing about pension contributions this year? Don't stop. If you can afford it, don't stop. If you can increase, now's a great time to increase and buy cheap. And if you've got money sat in your business that you can't use for anything else and it's not going to be needed to get you through a crisis, I've never taken more business than I've taken this month from existing clients, adding ISAs and pension contributions over the first year ever. I've already done mine for this tax year, which never happens because I'm so busy looking after everyone else. I always do mine at the last minute. But I deliberately made an effort to throw mine in now. I've got it available because now's a great time to be buying, and it would have been better 2 weeks ago. But and make sure you're getting advice would be my final thought on that. Yeah, I agree with Liam. Stay safe. Hope to see you on this soon. And thank you again, mate. Much appreciated.